Hi, my name is John and this is Business Update. In this week's episode, we'll be talking about some PC upgrades that you might be considering, which items should you prioritize, and what are the considerations that you need to consider in terms of if it's an important purchase and where do you think you can purchase them, if it's available or not. And obviously, one of the main considerations whether to upgrade your PC parts is in terms of availability and its price here. So let's get started here. Now, according to what's that website here again? According to PCgamer.com, obviously there are a lot of things that you can consider in terms of upgrading them. What parts that you should prioritize, or whether you should even consider purchasing a new PC altogether here. Desktop PC at that, actually. So let's see here some list of what you need to prioritize. So let's look here. So obviously, as gamers, it depends on the type of usage, what you're using it for in making that purchase here. Now, obviously, buying a new PC is totally different from just upgrading it. Now, obviously, you may have limitations in terms of cost or budget in the beginning. But if there's one thing that you can upgrade you should upgrade is your storage here. Now, there are two aspects that you need to consider in terms of upgrading your storage is in terms of type of storage. Typically, the more affordable one is the HDD here, or hard disk drive, which is a spinning hard drive, which is very inexpensive, but it's somewhat fragile, tends to easily break if you drop them or if it vibrates hard enough and so forth. Now, on the opposite spectrum, you have the SSD or solid state drive, which is the more faster in terms of transfer of data and reliability, but it's more expensive here. And in terms of pricing, let's see here. If we were to go to vilman.com, pricing for a storage can be tricky if you look at it. So let's look at typical hard disk drives. Now, for a 1 terabyte, which is the bare minimum, if you're considering of storing data, 512 is way too small if you're thinking of installing your operating system, and obviously application and even games can eat up a lot of spaces quickly. Let's see here. If you look at Seagate, so for a 1 terabyte, so you can see here Seagate Skyhawk 1 terabyte hard drive can cost you in the north of 2,000 to 3,000 bucks already. But if you were to look at a solid state drive, now there are different types. There's SATA SSD and NVMe SSD. Now the SATA is the more affordable one, and the ultimate storage is the M.2 NVMe. So let's use Samsung as an example here. So if you were to look at this, for a solid state drive, SATA SSD will cost you around 2,000, 3,000, or even 4,000 bucks already. And if you notice, the storage is only a fraction of what a hard disk drive, spinning hard drive would cost you. And if you want for an M.2 for 250 gigs, that's 970 Evo, that's going to cost you already twice as much. So the main consideration here is, if you have the budget, obviously the better choice is always the M.2 NVMe SSD. If you're looking to upgrade the performance of your PC or even in your laptops, there's a remarkable difference in terms of performance there. And based on my experience, obviously, owning a laptop where I used to own a Asus, where it has a spinning hard drive, where the boot times takes longer compared to an SSD storage drive, or in my Dell XPS 15s, where it takes a minute or so, takes only a few seconds from the powering it on to booting it up to your desktop. Makes it a faster experience. It's not just the booting up, but also the accessing of applications, especially if you're multitasking, opening several applications at the same time. So obviously accessing it through your SSD is much quicker and more preferable. So it depends on the uses that you're using here. But if you're on a tight budget, I think SATA SSD is ideal there. Now, question here is, what else should we consider? Okay, let's go back. So size is also a consideration here. So obviously it's not that just the type of storage that you need to consider, is how big the storage is. So if budget is an issue here, obviously go for hard disk drive with a higher capacity from 1 tera to 2, 3, or even 4 terabytes here. But if you have more data to store, maybe you need to create a NAS storage, so that you can separate it from your desktop where you use for daily usage here. Obviously, the higher the storage capacity, the more expensive it is, as you can see earlier, comparing it to just a 250 gigabytes of SSD compared to a 1 terabyte of hard disk drive. The price difference is substantial, even some as twice as much. So question is, what do you prioritize here? Now, based on my experience, what was recommended was, if you need to have an improved experience in your operating system or your desktop, invest on an NVMe, at least 250 gigs to 500 ideally for your OS alone. Another storage is SATA SSD, which is slightly cheaper, less, I won't say slightly, but more affordable, but more expensive than a hard disk drive. So you can store where your recurring files that you often use for retrieving, and the rarely used for storage is the hard disk drive. So you have 3 different types of storages that you can save your data depending, especially if you're into gaming. You want to store your games in your NVMe SSD, and maybe save your game files on the SATA SSD. So there are different considerations here, but obviously if you want a better experience in terms of faster boot up, smoother transition from opening different applications, I think the M.2 SSD is the way to go here. But price is a main hurdle here. Now, apart from the hard drive, obviously the other consideration that you need to consider is obviously in terms of GPU. Obviously, if you want better graphical fidelity, better improvement, obviously investing in GPU in the first place. Now, if you've invested in your GPU, you spend a little bit more in your GPU, then maybe you haven't spent so much in your monitor. And obviously, monitor is another consideration, that there are a lot of variables that you do consider. So in terms of the size, the resolution, and the refresh rate that you're looking for here. And it depends on your test case use. Obviously, if it's more for browsing, watching contents online, maybe a 1080p experience is fine for many test case use. But for gaming, maybe you want a higher not just frame rate, but resolution from 2K, from 1440p all the way to 4K resolution for 2160p. Now, obviously, the higher the resolution, the more expensive the monitor will become, from as cheap as less than $10,000 to all the way to 20 to even $30,000 here. So it would depend here. Now, if you have a basic monitor for your daily usage, maybe you'd consider a dual monitor setup here in the long run if you're planning to upgrade your PC, or in this case your monitor here. Obviously, if you're going to upgrade your monitor with the superior GPU, make sure that you have a superior CPU as well, whether it's Intel or AMD. Obviously, the more cores that you have would be more ideal, so it can do multitasking more efficiently and better as well. Let's see here. Yes, it's not just the screen resolution is important, but the refresh rate, especially for playing FPS or first-person shooter gaming. The higher the refresh rate, the lower the latency or lag in terms of aiming at the target to actually hitting the target here, from 60 hertz all the way to 144 to even higher refresh rate here. But obviously, the higher the refresh rate, the more expensive it tends to be. Let's see here. So apart from storage, your monitor, maybe something you'd consider, obviously, if you're planning to upgrade your setup, maybe the desk and monitor, not the monitor, desk and chair is something that you want to upgrade it also. Now, in my case, I invested already in a spacious desk setup and a comfortable chair in my case. Secondary monitor as mentioned, so if you're planning to upgrade your monitor to for better gameplay, better resolution, maybe a secondary monitor is applicable, so you can still use your old monitor and just add another monitor. If you're going to add the monitor, obviously you want to consider a monitor arm where you can mount it at the back of your table so it's easy to move about and it doesn't clutter your table here. Obviously, if you're going to upgrade your accessories, not just your desk and table, chair, obviously you want to consider a better keyboard, especially if you're gaming, also as mouse as well. Now, it depends on your preferences here. Now, there are different types of keyboard, from very inexpensive keyboard to more expensive. The one I've invested here, based on my needs, I need a full set of keyboard, as well as I like using a mechanical where it's very tactile. Now, there are different types of mechanical keyboards out there, from Logitech's 10 keyless. I forgot what model was it. And then you also have Razer and Corsair. Now, I chose Razer's Black Widow V3 Pro because of its availability, obviously. And obviously, it has RGB. Whether it has any improvement, obviously it does not. It does tend to do the job well, and it's reliable in terms of its tactile feedness. So it's very akin to the old keyboards that we used to own way back in the 90s then. Now, obviously, getting more features in your keyboard tends to be more expensive. I think the keyboard that I bought here cost me around the north of 10,000 bucks. But for my mouse, I just bought a regular basic Logitech G304. So the key that I'm looking for here is, obviously, it's not just the design, but in terms of its feel, that it's able to move smoothly across your screen. In terms of what did they call it? The DPI. Anything above 4,000 DPI is already acceptable for my taste. If you're into gaming, you want more precise control over your mouse, you want a higher DPI there. And for this one, it uses a one piece of AA battery, so it's rated to last for 250 hours. So we'll see if that does that in reality here. So what else can we look to upgrade here? Now, some not so important improvements. Now, as mentioned earlier, in terms of improving your SATA SSD to M.2, now obviously it may not be a priority here, but for my taste, I think there's a stark improvement from a hard disk drive to a SSD. Now, whether that's SATA or M.2 will be up to you, depending on the budget and for your use case here. For setting up your microphone, and that would depend if you do online classes or video discussions, or do online video streaming content and so forth. So you might want to upgrade it from a basic microphone, a lavalier mic, to a shotgun mic, to a dynamic mic, or even a cardioid mic. So that would depend on your preference. Now, is adding more RAM preferable? That's why it's not just the upgrading part. The key aspect here is when you start building your PC at the very beginning, you want to invest as much as you can, budget allowing. For RAM, you need to at least have at least 8 to 16 to have headway, especially if you like doing multitasking jobs, or even doing browsing. If you like opening multiple tabs, it eats up a lot of RAM. So in my case, I use 32 gig here. Switching to ultra wide monitor. Now again, that's more on personal preferences. Obviously, a wider monitor will be very costly. Maybe a 2 monitor setup would be preferable. That would depend on you. 4K resolution. Now, I would not strongly suggest to invest on a 4K monitor already, because even if, let's say, your CPU and GPU can accommodate that capability, the monitor and content, it's not yet commonplace here. So I think the 1440p or 2K resolution would be the middle ground here between high definition to 4K resolution here. What else? So this is more on preferences here. Let's go to the latter part. Yes, something that they don't recommend. So cable management, that would depend on your preferences. If you're a neat freak here, obviously, especially in this camera setup, you don't see the cluttered cables at behind the scenes here. Now, if there are people in your workplace, obviously keeping a tidy setup is important here. Now, I want to focus on the RGB aspect of setting up your computer. Is RGB improve the performance of your computer? Obviously not. It's more on aesthetics here, and obviously spending thousands of pesos here, does it improve the performance? Obviously not. It's more on the aesthetic. I think for my personal preference here, obviously investing on it is if you're going to look at your desktop computer for long periods of time, you want to see something that's pleasing and something that you could change up the setup in the future. And in the case that I have here, let me show here. So you can see here I have an overkill of a setup for the RGB. So you have the RGB on the fans on the top. Then there's the Lian Li streamer here, streamer plus here also. So you can change the color here. So I started with white. Now it's more orange with highlighted accents of green here. Now, will it improve the performance of your PC? Obviously not. But for my taste, obviously I can always set it up and change the configuration to my heart's content. Now, is it spending 5,000-10,000 bucks on lights necessary? That will always depend on you, which goes not just on the RGB but also in the case itself. That's why investing on a good case is important, so you can it can be flexible in terms of upgradability in the future. Now, the one that I just showed you earlier is a Lian Li 011 Dynamic. Now, it's one of the more popular designs, so it's something that you can look it up. And they have different sizes here, from the original mid-size 011 to the XL, the bigger one, and a smaller one. What do you call this? 011 mini design. So there's a lot of things that you can put in, whether it's a small setup or a big setup here. And at the end of the day, when making a purchase, obviously it's the budget as well as the availability. That's why looking at stores online, if it's readily available. And obviously if it's available, then go right ahead, make that purchase. But make sure when you buy that item, it's on a reputable store, so that you can get warranties. So if it's damaged or defective, you can easily replace it rather than purchasing it online, whether it's Shopee or Lazada. It's very difficult to have a return policy here. But it's up to you if it's a what do you call this? A great deal that's difficult to refuse. Anyway, I think that hopefully that helped you make a better purchase in terms of your PC experience. Hopefully in the future we can do a laptop version, or even for Apple upgrades, if it's even possible. Anyway, that concludes our discussion. So come back again on Wednesday for more business updates. If you have any questions regarding the upgrades that we've discussed today, leave your comments down below and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. As always, I'll see you in the next one. Take care.